So I just want to talk a little bit more about just one other track here. I want to talk about this track Waterfall because I wanted to kind of, I don't know if who does anybody out here record a lot of vocal in their stuff? 2, 3, yeah, 2 or 3. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting. Over the years, I've really listened to my own voice, and I'm very acutely aware of my own limitations as a singer. I'm pretty good with pitch and tone, but I'm no Chuck D, for example. So I'm not gonna attempt rapping again, which I did in the mid-90s, and it's on the internet if anyone really wants to go there. But and I think over the years I've kind of realised as well, particularly with this album, I'd started kind of experimenting with multi-tracking my voice. I'm going to play you a bit of this track Soothe from the album. So I think Soothe has 20-part vocal harmonies on it, and a fair bit of guitar as well. But this was a really interesting project, so I'm going to play another track after this, so I'll just play a bit of this one first. And yeah, just really wanted to talk a bit about how to achieve that effect as much as anything. I mean, obviously there's a lot of pitch correction stuff out there, if that's the road you want to go down. I mean, I'm pretty decent at singing in tune, so and also, what we were talking about earlier about those like organic touch points and that real human element. I mean, I don't want auto tune. I don't want to be Cher here or anything. I wanted it to have a kind of vulnerability to it, and I wanted there to be loose edges and bits of the vocal takes to really kind of stick out. So I'm gonna get this project open. Where is it? There we are. So this track's called Waterfall, and again it's it has a bit of a sort of, I suppose, I don't know, a few people have mentioned Pink Floyd when they've heard it, and it does have that kind of slightly ethereal quality to it. Yeah, so basically, this track is made up out of, what have we got? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Yeah, so there's 16 vocal parts on this track. Now, you know, the way the way I tend to put my vocals together on these tunes is I wait until the track's well underway. It's quite rare that I come at things from a purely vocal standpoint. You know, there have been occasions, and I tend to keep. I use music memos on my phone. So if I do, if some inspiration strikes when I'm out walking the dog or whatever, I've got the wherewithal to capture it. There's no real excuse why not to be honest, in this day and age. And that has happened before. There have been occasions. I remember I did this track, Mind Funk Psychedelic, many years ago, and I went over that loop, that kind of vocal loop in my head for the entire dog walk. People must have thought I was insane, just like singing into my phone. But what the hell? But it's inspiration happens at different times. But for me, I like to get the real bones of the track together to really engage with it, with the voice, to really get a feel for what it needs. And a lot of the time, the harmonies and the sounds that I'm using will suggest lyric lines. So basically, with these vocal takes, I mean, I've done multi-track vocals in the past, and I found it really difficult to get a continuity of performance. And I think that's something that's quite, particularly when you're doing multi-tracking, you might, you do one of the takes one afternoon, come back and do the next one the following day. Try to keep things really kind of in one take as much as anything. So I'll with this track, I started with the high vox.
Hear the call, I crawl inside your waterfall.
Beautiful. Voice of an angel, I'm telling you. So so I basically thank you very much. So I basically started with that amazing vocal performance, and what I did is just repeated for maybe 3 minutes along to the track, constantly seizing the performance, and then effectively what I will do is I'll create 3 separate vocal tracks below it, take that entire original take, and then just offset it by 4 bars or 4 beats, whatever it might be. So instantly you're getting a true stereo harmony of yourself. The next step would be to replicate that again, moving it a further 4 bars down, and then a further 4 bars down. So then you've got a 4-piece harmony of yourself. And then what I do is, I start getting creative with the panning. Some of the voices in this choir are panned, hard left, hard right, and then usually the other 2 will be just offset. So we're looking at like 34 to the left, 34 to the right. And then looking down at other parts, this one's at 31. I'll try not to get things too cluttered in one particular area of the stereo field, and just start building this kind of choir effect up. And I tend to find that once I've got the lead line, after a bit of singing along to the tune, a secondary kind of harmony might appear. I think on this case down here, I've just got 2 parts, and I've got 4 parts. I've got these 4 here. So then we might get into.
Hear the call, I crawl inside your waterfall.
So basically, so there's a lot of roughness around the edges there. But when you start, that roughness, as you multi-track it more and more, that roughness actually starts getting smoothed out. So it's almost a bit like a kind of auto tune in a sense. the roughness is still there, and there's imperfections in there, but
Hear the call, a crawl inside your waterfall. When I hear the call, a crawl inside your wall.
so what I will do with with a vocal take like that, once it's started to really come together like that, is it's a lot of work basically going through every single channel and putting a channel strip on them. So, for example, this would be a fairly typical channel strip, and I'd start on the high vocal. And just add some processing. So I'll use a bit of vintage warmer just to increase the kind of harmonic richness of the tone. I'll quite often use, depending on how noisy the vocal take is and how easy it is to gate it, I'll use a gate to just chop out any ambient noise, any rumbles, any kind of coughs and splutters and dogs barking and what have you that's going on in the background. Then I'll compress, just compress the signal a little bit, just tighten it up, basically just bringing the quieter moments up, particularly increasing that sort of just the kind of the power of consonants as much as anything. I know you're kind of reducing them and squashing them down slightly, but they also give them it gives it a real crispness. And the biggest thing for me then is, it's not the multi-band limiter, it's the EQ basically. So with the EQ, pretty much everything that I do with EQ these days is subtractive. So I particularly like the Pro Q. It's got a very handy kind of keyboard along the bottom, so you can. So, for example, you can zoom in on any of those frequencies that are maybe too ringing. Because bear in mind, you're talking at 16 versions of that delightful vocal now. Now, if you start layering all of those bell curves, so that as you can see there at the beginning of whenever I hit a root note, which in this track is an F. And you don't really want that. So what I'll do is I'll quite forensically go through every single vocal take and just find those little notches and just pull them out bit by bit. It's really interesting when you start using these things subtractively and you start really honing your listening, you'll hear all sorts of weird resonances. And I try not to make these too dramatic, because you can end up with a very unnatural sound. But the real purpose of it is just to allow enough space for all of your vocals to sit together, not too uncomfortably. And then at the end of the chain, just a touch of limiting, just to make sure that you're getting a nice kind of level off it. And then kind of at the end of that process, you're really looking at going through every single channel, applying those same principles. Obviously each part's going to have slightly different ringing tones, but the beauty of it is that those 4 lead parts up there will all have the same kind of bell curve. So what I'll tend to do then is I'll just bounce the audio down, just have a nice, because with the best will in the world, my computer's not going to stand for 20 instances of all of those plugins, and that's basically it. I mean, that's the way I get that kind of an effect, and it's the same with the guitar for me as well. I'll play sort of multiple chords like on this track, and just shift them down by 4 bars, 4 beats, whatever it might be, but just to give you a true stereo, proper spread. So yeah, it's basically at the end of the day, you know, you're looking at the overall whole, and it's been really surprising working on this project. I mean, I've spent so many hours working on these EQs and these sounds, you know, forensically, just getting them to fit, and it's been amazing how often really unusual, actually relatively unpleasant sounds, actually, you know, they occupy very specific roles, you know, within the kind of EQ curve, but the net result is a big, expansive sound that hopefully, you know, kind of gels together pretty well. So, any questions?
You said dogs barking. Right? I know you're half kidding, but like when you're tracking vocals, how important is the room and the mic and the preamp setup for you when working on something like this, or is it just like getting it out and quick dirty?
It's pretty important. I mean, I don't have a dedicated vocal booth or anything. I have a couple of decent mics. I usually, I have a pop shield, which is an old pair of stockings stretched over a coat hanger. I did have a beautiful reflection filter, and one of the dogs ate it, so I don't have that anymore. I have the metal bit, which is pretty much hopeless. So, so it's just really about improvising. I mean, you can't. At the end of the day, like, life happens around you, and you can't really allow, that stuff to get too much in the way of a half decent idea. So,
And what about the guitars? Are you tracking stuff direct in, or is that through?
Yeah, I have a pod, a guitar pod, which I do really like. I bought a Gibson, like an old Gibson SG for this album, and I'm really exactly. I'm really not a guitar player, as you can probably tell, but I think that shouldn't put anybody off from experimenting, particularly with textures and particularly with this kind of technology. You can create pretty much anything, and I think that a lot of us are too often intimidated by maybe our own lack of skill in certain areas, and I'm a very staunch advocate of kind of going for it and just trying to make it happen.
With the songs that you've played so far, do you find yourself wanting to move away from DJing and more into more music production and putting out albums rather than just a collection of single tracks?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a real inspiration to me. I mean, I hope there are still enough people out there who enjoy sitting down and listening to an hour's worth of music, and really indulging in that, because I think it's always been really special to me. And interestingly enough, since I finished this album, I've gone back to. I listen to artist albums all the time now, and they weren't so much an inspiration before the fact, but after the event, I wasn't necessarily expecting to make this album, when I set off to make it. But I think in retrospect, I'm kind of going back and just rediscovering that joy of people at like the big broad canvas that I think is it's got to be most artists' goal, I think, is to just create that real body of work that you can put your marker down by. So yeah, the answer is yes. I mean, the 1 series shows particularly I wouldn't trade for anything, and I think the long sets are they're very much a part of me, and it's not something that I'd want to stop doing anytime soon. But this whole project's taken me on a very different path and quite a different journey, and it's a really exciting one, to be fair. So
Yo, so I have a question about your drums. I noticed they're really big and tight, you know, and
Yep.
that's one of the things that I think is like key to
yeah,
electronic music, and I struggle a little bit with that. I mean,
uh-huh.
I get them to sound pretty good, but when I start mixing, they kind of lose the touch. Do you do a lot of live performing for drums? Do you like have people record drums, or how do you get your drum ideas out and process them? Or
No, I mean, I it's all programmed for me. So, you know, I mean, I'm a reasonably good judge of drums. Has always really, like I was saying earlier, drums has very much been my thing for a long time. And on these tracks where where they're much slower and there's quite a bit of space, I mean, there's room to be quite creative with them, but they do need, you know, there's a lot of sound there that you need them to be supporting. So, you know, layering is absolutely your friend. Just making sure that, first and foremost, making sure that when you strip all of that other stuff away, you know, do the drums sound like they belong together as a collection of sounds? You know, because a lot of the time when we grab things from sample packs here and there, they don't. You know, we're making decisions because that sounds really. I love that clap sound. That's great. Yeah, but it doesn't work with the rest of the stuff. You know, you're just kind of grabbing at stuff, and I think sometimes, you know, I've done tracks before where I've had a sound that's been just a great snare sound. I can't wait to, you know, it's just going to work a treat and all the rest of it. And you almost end up trying to fit the rest of the track into what the sound is doing. And that, you know, just keep both eyes on the finished product, because, you know, nobody, when you're playing one of your tracks out, or you know, depending on the type of music you're doing, you know, I guarantee you that 99.9% of people will, the only question that they'll be asking themselves is, do I like that piece of music? You know, nobody's going to say, you know what, if you change that hi-hat sound, that would have been a great tune, would have been a great idea. So, you know, I think sometimes you have to sort of let go of some of that very kind of hyper-focused production mentality, and just look at the overall whole. You know, is it a good idea? Is the track itself, does it have, at its core, does it have a really strong kind of component that people are going to like, you know? And yeah, just try and keep the drums sounding like they're one unit. That would be my advice, for sure. Mike, incoming.
Thank you. I have a sort of open-ended question. As someone who studied it specifically, how do you think about composition, and like, what's your approach going from the loop to the story now that you don't have the tyranny of the dance floor?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, composition for me is, you know, I just know that I love to be creative. You know, I love to find different ways to be creative. I always have done. I've never really allowed myself as much freedom as maybe I wish I had done. You know, and I think I can't see that changing anytime soon. Because I'm super proud of what I've done with this album. You know, I feel really passionate about it. I think it's quite a departure in many ways for me. But you know, I just feel. You know, I feel in some senses I feel quite recently I've felt quite disconnected from the dance floor, you know, because of that, because of the kind of moving on thing, and I've been so used to consuming music so avidly, dance floor music, for the last 20 years. You know, when I look at my record box up until Burning Man this year just gone, you know, each of the last 3 or 4 years I had 1,500 new tracks a year. All of them in key, all of them with cue points where I wanted them to be, and you know, I'm walking around to gigs with, you know, 10,000 tunes, and it's just an absolute, you know, all-consuming passion. But you know, with the best will in the world, if you're focusing on writing music, playing live, developing a marketing strategy to go out and sell this stuff to people, you know, you don't have the time to really delve as deeply as as maybe I did before into that. So composition. I mean, your question was about composition, and what was it something specifically that I didn't pick up on? I'm not sure, but
I really just kind of wanted to get your perspective on it as a concept, and also just like know what your approach tends to be now that you're starting with more organic elements rather than just starting with the rhythm.
yeah.
Because they still end up being pretty rhythm driven, and they
Yeah.
still end up telling a story. So I'm
Yeah.
just wondering what's your process?
Well, it really does vary from track to track. It's as simple as that. And I've almost been trying to impose that upon myself as well. So sometimes, for example, using I've started by programming a synth setting and just using that, and finding maybe plugging in an arpeggiator into it, just finding what tempo that sounds at its absolute best, and just trying to allow the track to grow and to build itself without you saying, no, that has to, that's meant to sound like Moby's last single, so therefore we're going back to basics. And actually, a lot of us, when we make music, we have those thoughts in the back of our mind of like, I want this is a killer dubstep track, and I really want it to, I really love Excision's latest single, so I really want it to kind of go balls out and have that kind of that sound and feel to it. And so you can very easily, I think, allow those and once you've done that, once you've allowed that into your mind, I think in the creative process, you're always thinking, well, is my drum as big as his, or is my bass line as big as his? And the answer is probably no, because so it's I think it's very easy to get sucked into that, and it can be on a much much less obvious way than that as well. It could be just I'm making a piece of breakbeat, and I might just have a quick listen to what's happening on Beatport at the moment. What are people buying? What are they liking? And then you already sown that seed of tramlining yourself to an extent, and that's what's exciting for me about this. Is it's very much a sort of it's very much me just doing my thing. So.
What's your best tip for finishing tracks? Best tip for finishing tracks.
Well, they're no use unless they're finished, basically. Well, I think for most people, I mean, what's the most exciting part of the process for you? Yeah. So, does it does the excitement diminish from point A to point B? Usually it does, to an extent. I've done it before. I got so pissed off with arranging tracks for a while. I'd have everything was done in my head, but on here, not so much. So, and I'd be going through this tune thinking, oh God, I've got to do a breakdown. I've got to spend the next 5 hours. I know what it sounds like already, but I've got to it's like blue collar work, and I'm done with it, and I just don't. So in some ways, I think actually compartmentalizing that part of the process and just saying, okay, I'm gonna, there's going to be a day when I'm really not feeling that creative, but maybe that's the day when I sit down and I'm disciplined, and and also, for me, learning to really love the mastering process as well, because for me that's very much part of the arrangement now. So I get into the forensic EQing and the real detailed work, and I really, really enjoy that. It's a big science project, and I think if you can, maybe look at what you don't like about that process. Listen to your gut with it, really. What really pisses me off about it? Is it the workload? Is it because I get RSI? Is it because it's just boring, or whatever? We'll just maybe try and think creatively about it. Just try and find things to enjoy about it, things to inspire, things to learn as well. Find new tricks, new things to extract from it as an experience.
So you kind of do it in blocks, like you'll have your creative process and mixing
Yeah.
in different
Yeah, I mean these tracks have they've evolved over quite a period of time. I'm always usually with tracks that I'm excited about, I'm very eager to get them finished so I can listen to them in the car and, you know, play them to my mates and all the rest of it. But certainly with this album, the process of refinement particularly was a really big deal. So I you know, when I put together an iTunes playlist, so there's 11 tracks on the album, put together an iTunes playlist and it was 116 minutes long. And I took it for a drive, listened to the whole thing from start to finish, and then came back to this, thinking it was finished, basically, and then came back to the studio and went through each track, figuring out when I was on that drive, you know, at what moment did I start checking Facebook? You know, at what time did I start thinking, you know, that's really been going on a while, that track, you know, and you know, and I was really harsh with the material as well. You know, I came back and when I'd finished editing the tracks down, it was an hour and 3 minutes. So it was actually 13 minutes of totally unnecessary music. But I needed that space. You know, I needed that different listening environment really to make those decisions. So, yeah. A favourite key to composing? That's an interesting question. I mean, probably yes, actually. I'd say it's F. Yeah. I mean, on this album, I don't know why, I've got 4 or 5 tracks that are in F. I've never really sat down with that particularly in mind, but yeah, I mean, actually, when I'm DJing as well, I have certain runs of tracks that seem to work very well in F. I don't know why that is, but yeah, that's the answer. Any other questions? Yep.
Do you master in the box?
I do. I mean, for my own listening, and to get the tracks to a point that I'm pretty confident that they're finished. I do master myself, and I have a sort of a mastering chain that I pretty much always come back to something pretty similar to that. You know, usually at the end of the chain, I'll have something that just shows me the kind of the headroom and all the rest of it, and the dynamic range. Obviously, a limiter on the end. I'll have usually a couple of EQs. I particularly like this. This has been long since discontinued. I think this EMI one, but I actually used to get all my vinyl mastered at EMI. So I used to go to Abbey Road, and they had these exact old consoles with huge knobs on them, kind of, you know, just massive notches and clicks and all the rest of it. And it just used to make stuff sound absolutely phenomenal, particularly on the top end. It's just beautiful. And of all of the kind of EQ emulators, this is something that's very much non-surgical, but it's, you know, if you need a slight boost or cut across a pretty broad range, then, you know, that's one that I use a fair bit. I'll look at the kind of stereo field of the track as a whole, see if it needs any warming, any extra kind of valve, processing. That can sometimes just help. Even the tiniest amount, I find, can sometimes help to just bind the drums with the rest of the track. You know, because you're creating these kind of tiny bits of additional harmonic data. And I'll quite often just put in a pretty sharp low cut filter just to take out any sort of horrible rumble down at the bottom there. But yeah, so I will do stuff in the box, and I'll get reasonably good results from it. But I'll always, for full on releases, I'll always take it to a professional mastering house and have it finished by them. It always it's just well worth it. It's just that it's the extra 10% for me, really. So
when you find yourself on a creative streak and you're writing a bunch of really cool music, you have like
just like say 10 projects of really good ideas,
Yeah.
and so you hit that wall of like, okay, I've been writing a bunch of music, I should probably finish some of this. How do you decide which track to go back and work on?
Yeah, I guess just allow again, just listen to your own inspiration with it. I mean, some tracks are right for some days, not for others. You know, some days you feel like really getting stuck into a tune that's actually quite complex to get right. Other days you just want an easy fix. So yeah, I mean, it also depends on. I mean, I had in mind with this from very early on that I was putting an album together. So, I kind of didn't want everything finished. I didn't want something finished 2 years ago necessarily. I wanted things to evolve and grow a little bit and get to that point where the compiling of it was a lot of work very intensively in the last sort of few weeks, just getting all the final nuts and bolts together, and that was a nice part of the process actually, because it was just those final forensic little touches, and also I knew I had a body of work, so I was eager just to get it done and get it out there. So
Talk about getting it out there.
Yeah.
Right, like another record and the strategy kind of around that. Next.
yeah, I mean, I won't go on too much longer about this stuff, but I mean, so the album's coming out. I've been looking quite closely at how to release it. I mean, it's a big question these days. It's it's a complicated marketplace. People know me as Elite Force, have known me as Lunatic, blah blah blah. But as Simon Shackleton, I don't have as big a name, and I was looking at ways to address it. So the plan with the album is to try something a bit different, and I'm going to go with an unbundled approach to the album. So the idea is that over a period of several months, one track from the album is going to be released every 2 weeks. Now, there's a whole bunch of reasoning behind that. There's 26th of September will be the date when the entire album's worth of music is out. It'll also be the date that the Pledge Music campaign that I'll be running will come to fruition. So, I'll generate income during that time through people pledging their support. I mean, there's all sorts of kind of fun things that I've kind of put together. Like I've got an old set of Technics decks and a mixer and a whole bunch of my tunes, and that's going to be one of it's going to be a nice package to give away on them. The album's called Piece of Me, and that's very much a piece of me that I'm kind of putting out there.
Simon, you're selling your techniques
I
through your
am.
pledge campaign.
I am.
Is that what you just said?
Yeah, kind of.
Wow.
Yes.
That's awesome, man.
And also CDJs.
Yeah.
So I have another package of CDJs, but the CDJs.
But how cool is that?
It's
Yeah.
fun. It's an interesting concept. So the CDJs I'm doing with a full wallet of CDs, as from back in the day when I was playing off CD, which wasn't that long ago, but it's a good sort of 200 CDs basically. So, and there's a lot of edits on there that nobody will have got hold of, and so I'm just trying to be quite creative with the campaign. One of the beauties of it in terms of building up that head of steam, it gives us several months to touch base with the public. The way I see my tribe as far as this music goes is built out of lots of tribes. It's a Pink Floyd fan here. It's quite a complex strategy in a lot of ways, but I'm looking to draw people in through different means over a long period of time, and that kind of constant exposure, I think will go a long way to just to building up a head of steam. There's other sort of Instagram. We're looking to get people involved. Basically, we're looking for people to. With each track will come with its own kind of mini marketing campaign, because the targeting of the tracks is slightly different. But we really want to assemble community around the release. The plan with the tracks is pretty much that throughout the process, there's every track's going to come out as a free download, you know, in exchange for an email address. But all the time, you know, we're going to be looking at pointing people towards the pledge campaign, towards what's going to be a beautifully packaged kind of art piece, effectively, that includes some of my photography, you know, fine art prints or whatever it might be. But we're just looking at ways of curating end physical products that people who believe in the music and have enjoyed the music up to that point will, you know, want to put their hat in the ring and support. And it's going to be a really interesting journey just to see how it all works. But for me, you know, I want to get this music into people's ears. You know, I don't want a big brick wall to come up when you say to someone, "Can you pay 50 cents for my tune or $1 or something?" Because sadly, that's what happens these days all too often. So, you know, I want to get the music out there. I want to point people towards that final goal of the 26th of September. And you know, and the whole album will just unfold piece by piece, and people will be able to kind of buy into it accordingly. So. Oh, there's one over there.
Licensing.
Mm.
I feel like with the label that I started a while ago and my own music on that label, just trying to figure out.
Great label, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm just trying to figure out like what to do with licensing, and like I don't even know what direction to go in.
It's a difficult one. I mean, licensing, the sort of the goalposts have changed a lot with licensing over the years. I mean, you know, I was fortunate kind of back in the day to get some big, seriously big licenses, but I think now with movies, particularly with a lot of artists going in for these 360 deals, management companies and record companies coming with a lot of clout, buying an artist hook, line and sinker and taking their 20-25% or whatever it is of everything that they do. You know, everybody knows that the real money's in live performance and merchandise. So the playing field where it's changed is, for example, if you've got the new James Bond film coming out and you have a choice of me writing a bespoke track for the James Bond film and, you know, curating it perfectly to the movie, or the Chemical Brothers coming in and giving the movie their track for free because it supports their tour, you know, the little guy's kind of blown out of the water slightly and all of that. And that is really the changing face of music licensing, unfortunately. And it's, you know, it's made it very difficult, you know, to get those cash cows in. I mean, just making money out of music is incredibly hard these days, you know. So yeah, I don't think there's any quick fix really as far as that's concerned. You know, maybe trying to team up with specific sync companies and specific you know, publishing houses that can push that side of things, but you'll probably quickly find that they want real specifics from you. You know, and I've done a bunch of trailer music in the last sort of 18 months, and it's just incredibly curated music. You know, it's like death by committee. They're not going to necessarily pick a track off the album and just go, yeah, it's perfect for a music video. Just go with that. That's fine. You know, it's just a much more complicated sort of model than that these days. So.
So I read that you recently wrote something on happiness not so long ago, and I'm curious to know what the balance for you is in making money and obviously paying the bills and having to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And what you now use as quantification for your
yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I wrote a big piece when I kind of hung up the Elite Force side of my career about a year ago. I wrote a big piece on my website about happiness and how that was my new sole focus. You know, to hell with it. I just want to be happy. It's slightly more in-depth piece than that, but that you know that was the basic subtext of it, and that, you know, that's certainly come by making music that I feel really passionate about. And that I love. The financial side of things, you know, I've become very goal focused, and I will be taking this out live. It may not have manifested exactly how it's going to come about yet, but we're in kind of mid-February, and there's still 10.5 months of the year, and I think we can very easily, see situations as being very static for us. Things aren't going to change. I'm not getting any bookings. I'm not getting this. Well, by the time 11 tracks have come out off the album, and all of the associate campaign that comes with it, I think there's every chance of actually reaching those goals. But sometimes you have to take a serious hit financially, and that's what I've been doing over the last year and a half. I've been turning down Elite Four shows, and the Elite Four shows, because I haven't been releasing music, have dried up as well. And there's a real discomfort that comes with putting yourself in that position, but it's also where the passion lives. Do you know what I mean? It really is that important that you do something that resonates within yourself, I think. And I think when you do that, it's like I've seen it with the One series. When you do that, it communicates to other people, and they feel that same energy. And at the end of the day, just being you in what you do will kind of, it will serve you so much better than being somebody else, I think.
Hi, Simon.
Hi.
I'm curious about your marketing campaign you mentioned earlier with the Piece of Me release and your equipment that you're going with this. I think that's great. That's consistent with the message. I'm kind of curious, what is the method by which is it a bidding process? Is it a lottery? And then also on the side of that would be, who would be your ideal recipient in your mind?
Well, that's a great question. Well, ultimately, my ideal recipient would be for someone who it really mattered. Who was able to use it, who was going to find a creative home for it. Who was going to find their own creative voice through it. As far as how it will work financially, I mean, I would personally, I'd really like to run a lottery system for it. So effectively a raffle, and everybody, you can buy, a $20 ticket or whatever, and then there's a cut-off point at which point you draw a winner at random. And we've found that quite a complex concept to get through with Pledge and with any companies, because it's the internet. There's a lot of fraud out there, and there are very strict rules about gambling, for example, which is effectively what you're suggesting. So, so it may be that we have to slightly think around that and just go for a fixed price point. I mean, Topspin, for example, has been around for years and years with the with their various models, and one option we looked at was simply putting it on eBay and it going to the highest bidder, but then that for me isn't that consistent with the message, and it doesn't really have, I want to see that on the same page as all the rest of the project. I don't want it just to be a sale that I'm making. I need the money from it to help generate towards the live show, and just to keep my head above water and all the rest of it. But I have other irons in the fire as far as that's concerned. But we're just thrashing out the final details on that now. So hopefully we'll have that launched in probably 4 or 5 weeks, I'd say. So. Yeah.
Earlier you said you're a very goal-oriented person, and I know you've seen a lot of success over the years. What type of things do you use? Like, what type of strategies do you use as far as organizing your goals and even just your personal life outside of music?
Yeah, well, I mean, the goals, I tend to, and I've really realigned them recently. So I've set myself 10-year goals and 5-year goals, 1-year goals, 90-day goals, and then coming right down to 1-week goals. I find it really helpful to set myself on pretty much all of them the shorter term goals is setting, say, 3 key things that you want to achieve in that time. You know, even in a week. You know, I want to prepare for the Pyramind tutorial and not embarrass myself in public. You know, so hopefully I've nailed that. Okay. But yeah, you know, so you just having those, and one thing that I found with that kind of approach is that it's a great boost when you get to tick them off. You can see you almost need to come back to them on a daily basis, first thing in the morning. Just have a look at how things are shaping up. Maybe tweak them a little, realign them. You know, if that part of the campaign or that part of your life wasn't quite working out, then you know, do it differently. Just think outside the box. And with the longer term goals, I think it's really important to have those absolute focuses, because then, you know, it's taking that 10-year goal and working back that shows you what you need to do tomorrow, actually, you know. And it's really important to, I think, to be focused very much on that end game of what you want to achieve. I'd be the first to hold up my hands and say, well, maybe I haven't done that so much over the years. You know, maybe I've just been quite happy being tossed around like a boat on the ocean a bit, and just, and I've really enjoyed the journey. And that's a big thing for me, is just making sure you enjoy the journey, you know. But this, for me, is a sort of, I've moved into a slightly different mindset and a slightly different part of my career, and it needs more focus, and it needs more of a sort of slightly more tunnel vision to get to where I want to go with it.
And do you write down all your goals? Or
Yeah.
most of them?
Yeah, I do. I use Evernote, and
oh, okay,
just have
great. I use that as well.
Yeah, I really like it. I just have a whole series of, tick boxes and goals, and shared across various people that I work with, and it's really helpful, I think, just to keep me on track with what I need. So
yeah, and then one thing on that as well, as far as like day to day even goes, do you write out like schedules of what you need to do that day and when you're going to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one thing I would say that's really fundamental is that take care of the little things, the real detailed little things. I mean, for me, if I don't get up first thing in the morning and go to the gym or do some sort of exercise, it affects everything that I do for the rest of the day.
Yeah, it lingers.
It
in the back
does.
of your head.
It does. It lingers in my head, and I'm kind of, geez, I really should have done that today. And it starts putting me in a real funk, And for example, if you know that you don't function that well if you don't have a snack every 2 or 3 hours, then make sure you have that snack on hand so that you're not 3.5 hours in and going, geez, I just can't work today. It's rubbish, because those are the little things. Those are, for me, that exercise thing it's that very first building block of my day. And if it's not there, the day's just doesn't quite feel right. So, I really try to, as much as I can, to stick to those things. And I do write calendars. I'll have a week printed out on my fridge with 7 a.m. gym, whatever, and it's a nice buzz to know that you've ticked off those little goals each day,
Yeah, it's rewarding. When
Yeah.
it's not written down, it's like, it's in your head, but
Yeah.
you kind of just forget about it.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys have fun with him or what? Anybody got any last minute questions, or I was kind of tailing down here, man. I feel like I learned a lot, and I already knew a lot about you. I stalk you and shit. It's weird. All right. Well, if nobody's got any last minute questions, I think a big round of applause. In order.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you're a music producer, subscribe to our channel and stay up to date on the latest Pyramind tutorial videos, track breakdowns, elite sessions, and more. Visit us at pyramind.com.